Good day and welcome to another edition of One-on-One with Swope Health. I am your host, Eric Wesson. Thanks so much for joining us today. Our guest is none other than Jackson County Prosecutor Melesa Johnson. And guess what? She's coming up on her first year as our prosecutor. So we kind of wanted to do an update. So I invited her to the show and she graciously accepted. Miss Johnson, how's it going?
It's going, Mr. Wesson. It is certainly going. It's crazy to even think that we are rounding out our first year, but I'm pretty proud of the progress that we've been able to make. If you know anything about crime, you know we didn't get here overnight, and so we're certainly not going to fix it overnight. But incremental progress is still progress. Baby steps are still steps forward. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about some of the things we've implemented thus far.
Okay, so one of the things that's a buzz around the community is the domestic violence and how you've taken that away from the city and brought it into the prosecutor's office for state charges. So tell us how that came about.
You know, when I was in Mayor Lucas's office as his director of public safety, I had the privilege of working really closely with Judge Courtney Wackel, who is the presiding judge over municipal court. And through that partnership and that work, I learned that according to the municipal court, about 90% of all domestic violence cases were being handled at the municipal level. Now, that's problematic for a number of reasons. You cannot tell me that 90% of all of the domestic violence incidents are worthy of municipal charge consideration that only carries a range of punishment up to 6 months in jail in a city that doesn't even have a jail. And so we are, or we at least have been, allowing domestic abusers to pretty much get off with a slap on the wrist. And then we can't be surprised at the escalation in violence, in lethality that we have seen. Last year, about 1 in 12 of our homicides had a domestic violence nexus. This year, that number is closer to 1 in 3. And so when I won the election and got the opportunity to do something about such an important issue, that's exactly what we did. During the second week of me being on the job, I sent a letter to all of our law enforcement agencies in Jackson County and all of our municipal prosecutors in Jackson County with a very detailed list of various factors that if they are present, we want those cases submitted to the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office for state level charging consideration or felony level charging consideration, as opposed to being submitted to the municipal court for, once again, just an ordinance violation consideration. And that is not any disrespect to our municipal courts or our municipal prosecutors. They are competent, they are hardworking, they are very knowledgeable, but they only have so many tools. And given the infrastructure of our criminal justice system, frankly, at the state level, we have a lot more tools to be able to handle those cases. And so, you know, with policy changes like that, it takes a little bit of time for them to catch on and to really see results. Well, last week we issued and made public our domestic violence dashboard that is showing early signs of success. A 13% increase in referrals received from law enforcement officials. That means that they're paying attention to our letter. It was clear, it was instructional, and it was effective. We have also seen an increase in charging rates amongst domestic violence cases, specifically domestic assault. We are now charging about 70% of all domestic assault cases, and that is up from 54% last year. But we can't stop there. We have to look at the property crimes cases that have a domestic violence or intimate partner violence nexus, the harassment cases, looking at various categories of crime and trying to figure out, okay, where is domestic violence or intimate partner violence at play here? And let's track them so that we can make data-informed decisions moving forward, which we have been doing already.
So what's the difference? You said that you have the domestic violence with a partner versus...
So it's domestic violence is one category, and then intimate partner violence is another category.
Okay, so who's the intimate partner?
So those are, with domestic violence, it's usually considered a spouse or former spouse. But we know that relationships can be complicated, and they certainly look different in 2025 than they have, let's say, for example, 25 years ago.
Right. As
social norms change, our definitions of things have to change. And so intimate partner violence is a term that really encompasses encompasses all forms of relationship, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's on the LGBTQIA spectrum, whether they're roommates, whether they're friends, right? Making sure that we're capturing all forms of cases that involve people in relationship to one another, even if they are not a former or current spouse or a direct family member.
Okay, yeah, direct family member. I think that was one of the things I was thinking about. Brothers watching a game, get into an argument, one shoots or punches or does something to the other. So now, when we talk about the domestic violence charges, is it an argument or does there have to be an actual physical altercation for it to be classified to come to your office?
So we do need a couple of things present, whether it's serious bodily injury, broken bones, signs of strangulation. And so there does have to be a certain level of physical harm incurred in order for it to reach our office. But there's a couple of other circumstances that allow us to intervene as well. Is there an active ex parte or restraining order on file? And then any level of domestic violence is committed. That can be considered for your felony charges. Did the conduct happen within the purview or vicinity of a child? That allows it to be considered for felony charges. So it's not just the level of physical harm inflicted, it's also who did it happen in front of? Is there a documented history? What is the track record present there that enables us to elevate it to the felony level?
So does that put a lot more cases in your office, or because you got a ton of stuff on your plate?
It does. And that's why we've seen that 13% increase of referrals coming from law enforcement. Because, in order to be a good partner, you have to educate each other sometimes. And I think over the years, there was a little bit of confusion. And some of our police officers, our law enforcement partners, were essentially forum shopping, if you will. I'll just send this straight to the city because I know it'll get charged, right? And that was a byproduct of some broken relationships between my predecessor and law enforcement and a host of other factors, right? I'm not here to get into the weeds on all of that stuff. I'm just here to try to find a clear path forward. And I think we're well on our way.
Okay. So what else is new?
What else is new? Safe KC is going really, really well. We're about a year and a half into that focus deterrent strategy. I think we talked at length about that the last time that I was here with you. And just as a reminder to your listeners, Save KC is a focus deterrent strategy where you identify those most likely to be affected by violence. And you do that through a number of metrics, whether you're combing through police reports, patrol officers exchanging information, going to community directly and figuring out who are the troublemakers in your neighborhood. And we invite all of those individuals to a meeting that we call a call-in, and they hear a variety of messages, one from a person with lived experience that has been incarcerated and that has changed their life. They certainly get an enforcement message from law enforcement and myself, but they also get to hear from a woman who, for example, at our last call-in, lost 2 of her sons to gun violence 30 days apart. And you could hear a pin drop in that room. Those young people just kind of sat up differently because they could feel the woman's pain emanating off of her body. But then you also hear a services message. Listen, we know we can't expect you to put the gun down if we're not prepared to put something else in your hands. So we have housing resources available, workforce development available. And so through that strategy, we've had probably about 6 call-ins thus far. We have a lot of people engaged in services, and we have seen a 40% reduction in homicides amongst Save KC identified individuals, a 62% decrease in non-fatal shootings amongst Save KC identified individuals. And we just keep on keeping on, and we continue the work. We want to see more reductions. We want to get more individuals engaged. We want to hire more social workers so we can help more people. And the funding is coming our way. And so we're really excited about what is next for Save KC.
Okay, explain the 40% reduction in homicides among that group.
So amongst the people that have been identified as being closely connected to violence through the metrics that I just explained, when you compare where we are this year compared to last year, where we were identifying a lot of the same groups and same violent individuals, we have seen a 40% reduction from this year compared to this time last year in the amount of homicides we have seen occur amongst the individuals that have been labeled as Save KC participants. And the same goes for that 62% reduction in non-fatal shootings as well.
Okay, so when they come in, you know when they walk through the door that they've been involved in some foolishness.
Absolutely.
So why are they still on the streets?
So
that's my $1 million question for decades. Why are they still on the streets if you have that kind of information on people?
Because information does not always equate to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the metric that we have to go by when we are filing charges, right? Mm-hmm. We have ethical obligations as prosecutors to not file cases that we do not believe exceeds that burden of proof. Mm-hmm. But listen, if you're in the passenger seat of a car when the driver is getting arrested and there's a gun under the driver's seat, you probably are into some stuff you shouldn't be into. Does that mean we have adequate information to charge you with a crime right then and there? No, because we don't have evidence to prove constructive possession that you were in possession of that illegal weapon. Mm-hmm. But we know you're at least in the margins. So Save KC is a proactive way to try to capture those individuals before they get to the point of actual charges. Another example of people that we service through Save KC are those that are returning home from prison, that are on parole, right? Usually, if you are coming home and you don't have any level of community aside from the one that you left that got you in trouble in the first place, right, what are you likely inclined to do?
Go back and pick up where you left off.
Return right back to that same negative ecosystem. So what does it look like if we make a condition of your parole that you have to attend a call-in and you have to receive these messages and participate in services so we could try to steer you away from that lifestyle before it drags you back in? And so that is some of the work that we are doing through Save KC. And when you look around nationally, these cities that are led by Black mayors that have seen historic reductions in crime, whether you're talking about Mayor Scott in Baltimore or in Chicago or in DC or in Birmingham, Alabama with Mayor Woodfin, they all leverage a form of focused deterrence, just like we're doing here. And I think that that's really affirming and should be somewhat comforting for the residents of Jackson County, that we have the tools. We just have to expand our capacity and make sure that we continue to lean in and not abandon strategies just because we don't see a massive reduction overnight. These things take time.
And you're charging a lot more cases when it comes to homicides. But what are we going to do about the property crimes? South Kansas City is, John Sharp is kicking and screaming about property crimes going on out in South Kansas City. Is there a remedy, or what can we do as far as a community to address that issue?
When I campaigned, I talked a lot about property crime. And that is because the vast majority of people that do find themselves being victimized by crime will do so through a property crime. Mm-hmm. And, these aren't insignificant incidents. These are people's livelihoods being taken from them, their cars that they use to get their kids to school, that they use to get to work, being taken from them. So it's always been a very high priority of mine, which is why in March, third month on the job, we launched the Revised Crime Strategies Unit, which is a dedicated team of attorneys that work directly with different business associations, neighborhood groups, and community members to once again identify the 10% of people causing 90% of the problems. And through that robust community engagement, I think in the first 6 months of my administration, we attended over 65 different community-oriented meetings so we could download that information, take it back to law enforcement, collaborate on investigations, and see more charges come to fruition. A great example of that is what we have deemed the burglary ring that we charged in April of this year. 5 out of 6 individuals believed to be involved in over 100 non-residential burglaries for a span of over a year and a half. Mm-hmm. That would not have happened without this crime strategies unit partnering directly with law enforcement. We also have prosecutorial liaisons at all of our patrol divisions as well. to make sure that once again we are doing that real-time collaborating to make sure that we're checking all of the boxes with law enforcement before a case is even submitted to our office so that we know we can be able to file charges. So, and property crime is tough. Those cases are difficult to solve. Usually people have on gloves and they're wearing those ski masks. And
Kia boys.
Exactly, the Kia boys. And you know what? They're pretty sophisticated.
Yeah.
They kind of get a modus operandi to the point where it's like clockwork. And that's exactly what we saw with the burglary ring, right? They were in and out in a matter of seconds sometimes. And also with property crime, we have to make sure that we are not adding to our own victimization. Lock your cars. Small businesses, put up signs that remind your patrons to lock your cars. Acting like we don't have a crime problem is not going to help our crime problem. If you do have a small business and you have a glass storefront, make sure that you are investing in things like that $300 film that you can put over your glass storefront that makes it almost impossible to penetrate. Make sure that your camera system is high quality and high visibility. Make sure that you do have strong locks on your establishment. We have to understand that we are a major metropolitan city and we're going to have crime. So let's make sure that we are doing what we can to minimize our vulnerability to being victimized. And that's not victim blaming. That's not victim shaming at all. That's just being real. That's being practical. And that's having some sense.
Mm-hmm. So the sheriff really runs the jail in Jackson County. So we've got a jail that's getting ready to open up here soon. Are there enough beds for it already, or is it already obsolete?
Not in my opinion. Not in my opinion.
Which one is
that we don't have enough beds. Okay. That we don't have enough beds. But that could be subject to change. I do want to applaud the legislature for picking a model for the new detention center that allows for expansion. It's a modular system, meaning that they can add on pods at any given time. But of course, I would have liked to see a bit more capacity. We are charging a lot more cases, as you mentioned, which means we're going to need a lot more beds. And I think that that's a great example in trying to inform the public of how the entire criminal justice system has to be well resourced in order for this thing to work like a well-oiled machine. And without an adequately sized jail, that's going to be difficult. But I'm not in the business of complaining. I'm not in the business of trying to find excuses as to why things won't work. I'm trying to figure out what ways that they can. And that's why I've even created a new position in my administration called the Director of Impact that is really focused on expanding our diversion programs to make sure that people that don't have to be incarcerated in order to receive their accountability and rehabilitation, we're not wasting beds on those individuals. We have alternate means of accountability that really lean into trying to reduce the likelihood that they will reoffend. So we're just continuing to be creative and trying to strategize around the issue.
So do you think that at some point in time you'll get in a situation or a position to say, okay, there's some kind of cap on how many people can be incarcerated. So are you going to get into a situation where you're going to have to pick, okay, do I have to let somebody out so that I can put somebody in or keep those numbers where they're supposed to be?
That's already happening, Mr. Wesson, because our current Jackson County Detention Center is beyond capacity. And so that puts our judges in a very interesting predicament. We can ask for detention as prosecutors all we want, but that ultimate decision lies with the judge. And so that puts our bench in a position where they are having to do a on-the-spot analysis on, okay, this person that is before me right now has been deemed as a risk to public safety, but my jail is over capacity.
Right.
Who looks like a likely individual that can be released so that we can have a place to hold the individual that is appearing in front of me right now? Those are difficult decisions to make. And I want to kind of back the bench and our judges up because I know that there have been a number of incidents that have happened in our metropolitan area, whether or not you're talking about firefighter Dustin Hoffman up in Clay County, where, that particular judge let a woman out on bond that was not a bond that was out of the ordinary for the charge that she was facing.
Right.
But he lets her out. And mere days later, she commits a heinous stabbing of one of our first responders. People are not perfect, and judges are people, but we have to look at how the system puts people in a predicament to have to make some very, very difficult decisions.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's what if, I shoulda,
yes,
if I coulda, woulda. And you know, one of the things that you said were about the city and the police jail. There are jails in all the police stations. They're holding cells. Mm-hmm. Let's call them that. Those could be utilized a lot more. And you know, the other day, you were at the Urban Summit meeting, and I came up there because I just get so tired of listening to police come up with excuses about loitering ordinances and those things. And when those things were implemented, there were open conversations about them. But now the police, well, we think it's unconstitutional. That's not what we want you to do. Let the judge determine. We need to get these people off the street.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things, because we've been talking about the same thing on 31st and Prospect for 14 months at least. And it's probably been going on beyond that. But now it's the same issue, just about the same people. And it looks like some of the things have moved out into the community. Santa Fe is getting a lot of people walking through their neighborhoods that Marquita Taylor was talking about. So tell us how you feel about that type of situation there.
You know, Mr. Wesson, we talk about this often. I am quickly learning how to mind my county business. However, just kind of broad commentary on that. Again, every lane of this system has a job. And we need to stay in our respective lanes.
But we need to do something if we in that lane, though.
Yes. And so once the policy is created and the ordinance has been passed, the enforcement arm needs to enforce those ordinances. Me as the prosecutor, I don't get to tell the legislature. I can make suggestions on what law changes I think would be beneficial and advantageous to my office to make it easier to prosecute crime. But at the end of the day, I don't get a vote in Jefferson City. It is the legislature that creates the foundational laws that I thereafter have to follow and rely on. The same rings true for city council and law enforcement. And so, you know, those conversations I know are ongoing. I know that there is a lot of education, once again, that has to occur. But I would like to see that loitering ordinance enforced more, especially in the Prospect corridor, where, as you know, that is where I have the privilege of calling home.
31st and Prospect. On Fridays, you know, the papers come in at 5 o'clock in the morning, so I get up at 4:30 to go to the office to receive the newspapers and process them in. And there's people out hanging out at 4:30 in the morning on 31st and Prospect like it's 12 noon.
Exactly.
And it's just mind-boggling to me. So as we wrap up, what can we look forward to for the next year, this year that's coming up?
Ooh, a lot. We're working on a lot. We have a new combat director, Murray Woodard. He is just over a month on the job. And so people can expect a new and improved combat with better customer service for our awarded agencies, with more visibility in community, more community resource fairs, making sure that prevention dollars actually prevent crime, more data-informed decisions as it pertains to combat, and just diversifying the types of initiatives that we fund to make sure that we are covering more ground. And so I'm really, really excited about that. You can also expect to see a major revamp of our diversion courts, specifically New Start, again, hiring Mike Enos as my new director of impact to make sure that we are entering into more community partnerships, to make sure that, you know, we aren't just giving people jobs, we're actually giving them the tools to be able to navigate those jobs and to be productive citizens. You can see more policy changes to increase our charging rates even more collaboration with law enforcement. And something that we're working on that I'm really excited about is, you know, when you talk about the population that is causing the majority of crime, our crime drivers, if you will, we like to talk about them as elected officials in government and even the criminal justice system and various institutions. But very rarely do we get a chance to talk directly to them. And even right now, as the prosecutor, I can be Melesa from the 30s as much as I want to, but now with my title, some people are not going to be inclined to talk to me about their experience and why they've committed the crimes that they have. And this is a very difficult population to reach, but they're the ones with the answers. And so while we're throwing all of this money at this problem, city $30 million investment, combat, private philanthropic investments, we need to make sure that we are directing those dollars in what is going to yield the most results the fastest. So we are currently developing a survey to administer to every single person that enters into a plea agreement through our office. And it's going to be an assessment that can be self-administered because we want to elicit honest answers. We don't want somebody hovering over their shoulder and kind of intimidating them into being dishonest. And this survey is going to have questions like, have you ever had access to affordable housing? What do you deem affordability to be? Do you have children? How would you rate your parenting on a scale from 1 to 10? Understanding how you've rated your parenting, how does that impact your self-esteem and how you move about the world? Really trying to figure out, okay, what is it that makes some people more susceptible to crime than others? And of course, we have our obvious ones: poverty, lack of education, concentration of ghettos, and disinvestment. But what else? Mental health, right? What else is it? Is it social media? Is it not having positive friend associations and wanting to feel wanted? Because there are studies out there that show even more kids coming from two-parent households where they've done everything right are finding themselves in a life of crime because of the glorification of violence in our music and our movies and our TV shows. Poor emotional intelligence. We've seen domestic violence rise amongst young people. And I'm not talking about 21-year-olds. I'm talking about 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. Our juvenile officer, Monica Penrose, just let me know that she's seeing an increase in those cases coming through our court. And so what is that? What is going on there? And we have to go to the source in order to get those answers. So that is in the works as well. More visibility. And more transparency. That's another real mark of my first year of our administration, whether it is the online search tool for police reports where individuals can literally go on my website and see where their police report is in the life cycle of a criminal case. Has it been reviewed? Has it been charged? Has it even been submitted to my office at all? Right? Just released the domestic violence dashboard. We also have our own general crime dashboard on our website as well. Transparency continues to be a hallmark of my administration because you can't just do the work. You got to bring the community into the work that you are doing as well.
All right. Our guest today was Jackson County Prosecutor Melesa Johnson. Good luck. Let us know if we can ever do anything. You need to come on and give people some last-minute information or emergency information, and we'll help get it out as soon as possible. As always, I have the greatest viewing audience in the world. Till next week, remember, tough times don't last. Tough people do. Until next time, peace.